Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blasey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and this is episode number 8. On today's episode, I'm joined by a good buddy of mine, Steven Stockman from Northern Missouri. Steven and I dive into a lot of different topics, but from an outsider looking in, Steven has an unbelievable ability to break down a piece of property and really hone in on bucks, on mature bucks, and really find their core area and kill that deer. He's done it time and time again, and we dive into a little bit of that. We also talk about a 3-year quest he had with a deer he called Boomerang, and he had a lot of history with this deer, and he ended up killing him as a 5.5-year-old in late season in Missouri. So it's a really cool story. You don't want to miss this one. It's pretty cool how it unfolded, so I hope everybody enjoys it. All right, here we are. We are back for episode 8 of the Fall Podcast, and today I have a very close friend of mine on from Northern Missouri, Steven Stockman. Steven, how you doing?
Good, man. How you, AB?
I'm doing good. Glad we could get some time here. I know you're up in New York and on a little work trip, and we'll get into that here soon. But before we get too far, I'd like to have you tell everybody, who you are. And I mean, I obviously know who you are and where you're from and kind of what you do for a living.
Yeah, you want the real story, or you want just a fabricated story?
I want the real story because I already know every story. I know all the fabrications.
Well, the real story is I'm just a country boy, basically from north central Missouri. And grew up there all my life, and it's been a passion of mine, just bow hunting, and just like everyone else, I grew up rifle hunting on the family farm with my dad, my brother, and my mom, and really taking a passion for deer hunting and turkey hunting. And I'm trying to think of what age it was. I know I was young when I first got my first bow, but once I did, it was like a light switch. I got to the point where I still loved to gun hunt, but man, bow hunting was my thing. And I'm not an expert whatsoever. And I'll never, ever claim to be, because I've killed some nice deer, but nothing like holy moly crazy big, but some good mature bucks. And I can say that every deer I've got on my wall, I have killed with a bow and not a gun. So, and not that I have anything against gun hunters, because I don't whatsoever. It's just a passion of mine to bow hunt. So yeah, I started bow hunting at a young age, and then turned into just an absolute burning fire passion, and kind of led me to where I am today. I went off to college for a while, and then went to work in the city, and got an opportunity to move back to my hometown when I was 26 probably, and met my wife, started a family, and worked as a lineman for a telephone company in northern Missouri and southern Iowa. And so after work as a lineman, I started following my passion of setting up hunting properties for clients. So one by one, I started picking up clients and setting their farms up and helping them. Just trying to help them, make their farm as good as it could be. And some of these guys didn't have time to do it, so they really wanted me to do it. It was extra money for me and my family. So, I was 100% on board, and just loved doing it anyway. So it was like not even working. So that's kind of led me to where I am today. I did that. And through the love of the passion of setting up farms and whitetail deer and habitat work, I just met the right people and was fortunate enough to get offered a position to do it full time. So I've been doing that full time for about a year now. I work with Paul Sawyer of Whitetail Properties, and I set his farms up for him and help him on all of his stuff and achieve the goals on his properties, along with several other clients that we still have in southern Iowa and northern Missouri. But through all that, I've also went and got a real estate license and hold my license with Whitetail Properties, and will eventually be a buyer's agent around my area with another well-respected big buck killer in North Missouri. And very, very excited about that opportunity because it's in my backyard, working with him and doing stuff. So all of it will kind of go hand in hand, with helping buyers around northern Missouri find the property of their dreams, and then also being able to give advice if they need it on helping set it up and still do habitat work and farm management work on the side. So in a nutshell, that's kind of who I am and what I do. And I'm just like anybody else. I just love to deer hunt and really enjoy land and everything that goes into setting it up.
You definitely are way too humble, because if everybody listening, now it's not a lot of people, it's probably about 3 people that are listening, but if everybody listening could see the deer that you kill and the deer that are on your wall, you've got some very, very good deer and very respectable deer. Now, you were talking about the land management and everything, so I definitely want to get into that. But first of all, there's a question I want to ask you about, when you're going into the season and you're targeting your bucks. Now, to break down for everybody, break down what your area is about. Now, obviously, I know I hunt with you. I've hunted with you for the last 4 years, and yep. I'm familiar with your area. But break down, what your deer, what your bucks are like, and also I want you to break down kind of what you target going into the year. Is it age class? Is it inches? What are you looking for?
Well, just to set the record straight real quick off the get-go. So like anyone listening who wants to come to northern Missouri and hunt, we have really small deer. I mean, there's nothing big here.
Yeah, just look at my wall. They're real small.
No, all seriously, man. Going into the season, dude, I'm just like you or anybody else who just loves deer and deer hunting. I'm just really, really passionate about 4.5 and older. Now, I've made mistakes and I've shot my 3.5s and I've done my share of, mess ups. But that's just all, a learning curve, and it's all just part of it. As long as you're having fun, you're keeping the I guess the goal in mind the whole time, and you're trying to work towards it every year to become a better hunter and a better you, then I think it's all good no matter what you're shooting as an individual, as long as you're having fun and you're enjoying the outdoors. Me personally, I go into the season looking for a 4.5 and older. Now, on most of my properties or most of my farms that I have or hunt, I have a relationship or I want to say a history with this deer. Just like anyone, you see him at 1.5 and 2.5, you don't pay him much mind, but once you see him at 3.5, you're like, okay, well, that guy's coming into his own, and he's got this characteristic, so we'll give him a name, and then we'll watch him for next year and see what he becomes, and then go from there. Maybe we won't shoot him as a 4.5, and maybe we'll hunt him as a 5.5, or maybe maybe he's 3.5, and I'm not sure if he's 3.5 or 4.5, and I want to get in the stand and get my eyes on him and see if he is 4.5 or 3.5 just by judging him on the hoof. And something like that happened exactly this last season. I actually had a deer show up, and I had no idea who this deer was, and I still don't, because he disappeared on me. But had him on cameras all summer in the beans, and I had the perfect spot set up for him. I was just waiting. I was running a Reconyx video camera, so I was lucky enough to get the intel of him going back to bed one morning, like at 8:30 in September. And I know exactly where he went. I knew exactly where he'd been coming into the field. So I waited for the right wind. I went in to get a look at him, and ended up, I'm set up for him to come to me from the east. And lo and behold, like, any good deer with respectable antlers on his head, he was obviously a nice buck, or I would have been pursuing him. I looked to my right, and he was straight south of me. And he was at 50 yards. And I'm just like, what? I've watched him go into this ditch going to the east every morning and come out of that every morning or every evening. And why is he coming here? But he just played the wind just like any other deer would do. I mean, I was hunting him on a northeast wind that evening, and he circled around the creek and came out directly downwind of me. He did not bust me. I actually could have killed the deer if I wanted. I had him at 44 yards and decided to pass him because my goal was to go in and look at him and to see if he was a 3.5 or 4.5. Once I got my eyes on him, he was a 3.5-year-old deer. Now, he was a 155-inch 3.5-year-old deer with a bunch of splits and kickers, but still was not the deer that I was going to shoot in late September with my first archery tag. So, yeah, like anyone else, man, I look for age structure. I go in looking for, I try to hunt a specific deer, but I'm not so hung up on that deer that if another 4 or 5-year-old deer that comes in gives me an opportunity, I won't take a shot at him. I just like mature bucks, really.
Yeah,
and I like the chess game with them.
Right, you like the story. You like to build the story and try to capitalize on that, and it's the challenge. You're just like me. I mean, and every other bow hunter out there, it's the challenge and it's the journey. It's not so much it's not so much the kill. It's the journey that makes the whole experience for you.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, and like now, I mean, I'm even getting into the stage where I have 3 little girls. I have a 9-year-old, I have a 6-year-old, and I have one that's 18 months. And, dude, I mean, as well as I do, AB, you've been here, but I mean, Cadence is completely like a chip off the old block, dude. I go through trail cameras in the summer, and she lays down the front room floor with me, and she tries naming all these deer, and she'll be like, "Is that one a shooter, Daddy?" And I'll be like, "No, probably not." And she's like, "It's a shooter for me, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it could be." But that's been a fun new twist on everything, is been able to take her and get her started, shooting deer and turkey, and she is ate up with it. It's awesome. I mean, she's crazy about it.
Yeah, you're not going to get much time to hunt here in the next couple of years either, because P's coming up, and she is going to be another chip off the old block, and she's going to be right there. So you're going to have 2 little girls that you're going to have to get on turkeys and deer, and you're not going to have any time to hunt.
No, and that's fine. I'll definitely. I've had 30 years to hunt deer and do my thing. I'll sit back and as long as they're willing and they're interested in doing it, then by golly, I'm gonna try to take the time and do my thing and teach them. I might even have to recruit you to come up and sit with one of them.
Hey, I'm all for it. I feel like I'm part of the family. I've known you guys for the last 4 years now, and I've been there quite a bit, and I love those girls. They're the best, and I'd be more than happy to come up and sit with them and make sure they shoot the right deer.
Well, for them, they're all the right deer. Cadence has killed. She killed a 1.5-year-old the first year, which was 2 years ago, and then last year we wasn't able to capitalize on the first youth season. She went with my dad, but they didn't have any luck, or Cadence couldn't get on a deer, and they didn't get one killed. I was in Oklahoma filming at the time in late October, and so I came back home and I hunted with her. And this story. This story already, but so I filmed up on the Iowa line with Paul through rifle season, and then he went back home to take care of stuff, and I went hunting with Cadence in the regular youth season, or the regular rifle season. Now there's only a couple days left of season, and we were up on the hilltop blind, and I'd been hunting a deer all year last year that I called Hush Hush, and the deer
giant.
Comes. Oh yeah, just a mid-70s deer. And the cool thing about that deer was, though, he was 4.5 last year, and I was thinking he might have been 5, but after finding his pictures from the previous year, he was definitely a 3.5. That was like a mid-30s. So from 3.5 to 4.5, that deer went from mid-30s to mid-70s,
which is unbelievable.
Yeah. So, and who knows, what he'll be this year. I keep saying he's my next. He's not my next, but he's going to be the next 200 in that area. Given this year and next year,
Yes.
provided someone kills him or doesn't kill him this year. But anyway, the deer hush hush comes out at daylight, and it's the first time I've got a set with Cadence rifle hunting this past rifle season, and I said, all right. And I had a decoy out already. And I said, now Dad's going to grunt and try to turn him our way. It's like the 14th or 16th of November. So it's just breaking daylight. I could kill him myself right now. And he's by himself. He's not locked down. He's
How far did you
cruising.
say he was away?
He was 100 yards, maybe just a touch over 120. But he's up on his feet. He's cruising all by himself. I grunt. He doesn't hear me. I grunt louder. He heard me. He does not look. He never missed a step, and he never looked my way. Now, I'm confident if he would have looked and saw the decoy, he would have stopped and maybe came in a little bit, and she would have killed him. But after that deer gets off, she's like, oh, man, Dad, you should have killed him. And I'm like, no, this is your hunt, babe. I'm here with you. And she said, yeah, but you deserve that deer. You've been hunting him all year, and you deserve him. You should have just took the gun and killed him. And I was like, no, that's not how this works. What kind of a dad would I be to take you out deer hunting the first time of the year and then at first light shoot the biggest deer on the farm? That doesn't even make good sense. It's like wiping before you poop. It doesn't make any sense. So,
and that speaks volumes about both of you, because as you alluded to, she's a chip off the old block. I can attest to that, because that is you to a T. You would do anything for anybody before you. I don't care if you knew the person or not. That's just you. And for Cadence to do that as well, I mean, to say that she wanted you to kill that deer, and she probably didn't want to kill that deer because she wanted you to do it and you deserved it. And, that just, you've raised that girl right. And, and your father raised you right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't find a lot of people out there that would do that same thing. Mid-70s deer come out for, first light. I mean, a lot of people are going to try to kill that deer if their kid can't, if it's just out of range. A lot of people are going to do that. So,
well, I've had a lot of, it's not just me. Her mama helps a lot. Christy is amazing mama, and she really, instills a lot of stuff into the girls, and it's definitely a working partnership. It's not a one-sided deal. So
yeah,
it's all fun. It's all good.
But to let everybody else know, Cadence actually did end up killing a good buck that year as well.
She did.
And I'll put some pictures up on social media of that too, because she was so happy that you guys called me or after you killed them, and AB, I killed one, and I'll never forget that phone call when she called, and it was really cool just to hear her voice, and I wish I was there with you guys, but it was really cool.
Oh man, it was actually amazing. It was the second youth season in the end of November, and it was over Thanksgiving. It was like a 3-day hunt right over Thanksgiving, and man, we'd hunted morning and evening, and we'd had some mishaps, and she hadn't been able to get the job done or pull the trigger, and we kept seeing these deer that are just coming out of range. So the last day, we drive in, me, Presley, and Cadence in my truck. We drive in, pull the blind that we had set in the cedars that had brushed all in. I moved it, relocated 200 yards to the east, and then brushed it all back in with cedars. Came back that night. We were running late because we were coming from Thanksgiving dinner. And we get in the blind like at 4 o'clock, I think. And literally she'd been playing this, crime wolf game with me all weekend, like, Dad's a good buck. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, and she's like, no, really? I'm like, no, I'm looking. I'm like, where, and I got binoculars up and I'm looking. She's like, I'm just kidding. I'm like, sis, you're gonna say that and Dad's not gonna listen. So that's gonna be a lesson one day, and then literally we're in the blind and I'm like glassing, everything's set up and I'm glassing and I'm looking all around and we've got deer out here and we're watching, and all of a sudden she's like, Dad, big buck. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, So I'm still just glassing my binoculars. She goes, no, really, Dad, right here. And I put my binoculars down slowly and look. Literally, this 4.5-year-old deer comes out at 25 yards from us, comes straight from behind us, comes down through the CRP, crosses into the field, and comes out into the bean field, the cut bean field in front of us. And I've seen this deer one time on the hoof. I have probably no less than 100 videos and pictures of the deer from last year. And I've seen him one time in daylight on the hoof. Everything else has been nocturnal, and just like it was supposed to happen. I mean, he strolls out. When we first see him, when she saw him at like 25 or 30 yards, when I first saw him, he was at like 40. And then she gets on the gun, and I stop him, and he turns broadside, and she ends up squeezing off, and she just smokes him, and he dies like at 40 yards right beside us. I mean, it was. And literally, AB, she jumps straight up on my lap, gives me the hug, and says, "You're the best dad in the world," and just cries. And that just melts you. As a human, that's just wow.
I can't wait for that moment. If Peyton,
yeah.
if she takes to hunting and and wants to do that, I can't wait for that first moment, whether it's a turkey or a deer or whatever it is. That's what it's all about right there.
Well, you'll remember it the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time. I mean, I've hunted with a lot of people, and I've had a lot of fun in the outdoors, but dude, there's nothing like passing it on to your kids and seeing the excitement on their face when they really have got that fire, and I've been easy on the girls. I don't want to push it. I don't want to pry. I don't want them to do what they don't want to do. If they want to be cheerleaders, I want to be cheerleaders. If they want to be a football player, I want to be a football player. If they want to deer hunt, I want them to deer hunt. And that's what I've always said. I'm like, if you want to go, then Dad'll take you. If you don't want to go, then do backflips on the trampoline. I'm all about that too.
Yep.
But yeah, Cadence is 100% on, and Presley, she will be too eventually. Right now, she's still kind of like iffy, kind of wishy-washy on it, but she'll come around. I think she'll be fine too. She'll do it.
Yeah. And to go back, I don't know if I ever asked you, but you said, and I remember when you and I talking about that deer throughout the season, and you were saying that deer is just so nocturnal. I mean, every time you saw him on camera, he was nocturnal.
Yeah.
What do you think made him come out in the daylight hours to get a shot at? And what do you think was the deciding factor for that?
Well, honestly, I think the deciding factor is that it was that second rut phase kind of deal thing, or the tail end, because every buck we'd seen the prior 2 days had been coming out checking does, running each other around the field. The bucks have been running each other around the field, pushing certain does around the field. And honestly, I was really hoping that she would get a crack at one of the big guys on the farm. We had a couple good deer on the farm last year, and I was really hoping she'd get a crack at one of them. But I think what happened was that deer strolled out, and he was checking the field and checking some does, and maybe going to go check a scrape over on the edge of the field, and ended up getting shot by Cadence, on the way out. But that's kind of what I'm thinking now. But it was just that, seeking phase still. He wasn't locked down. He was up rolling and just got caught. So,
because you guys were hunting, it was a cut bean field, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Okay, so you were looking over a cut bean field. So, I mean, that could have had a little bit to do with it, but I think I agree. I mean, those bucks, he was probably just cruising and, looking for that next possible doe that might be into heat too.
Yeah, because honestly, every deer that came out in the morning and evening, the prior 2 days, they weren't really coming to feed. They were coming to check. We'd had 15 to 20 does in the field every night, and the bucks that were coming in were moving around, chasing each other around, and really picking out these doe groups and trying to, get down and send them, and seeing if any of them were in estrus.
Right. Yep. And what time of year was that second? What time of year does that second youth season fall?
Yeah, right around Thanksgiving. It was right around like I want to say like the 22nd, 3rd, and 4th, somewhere right in that area of November.
Yep. And that's another thing. It might be a good transition point. I want to talk about Missouri and how they deal with their seasons and their telecheck system. Michigan, in my opinion, we're kind of behind the times. In my opinion, I've hunted a lot of different states. I've got to be around a lot of different states like Illinois, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, Ohio, Indiana, like a ton of different states, and that's like Wyoming, everything. And a lot of those states, they do that telecheck. And I think Missouri does it one of the best ways. Can you break down like how what the process is for a hunter after, that hunter kills a deer and what they have to do and, how that process works?
Yeah, it's actually pretty simple. I mean, if you have a tag, which anymore, like Missouri has an app you can just download on your phone and enter your hunter education system number and all that kind of stuff in there. If you don't have that, you got a social, whatever, get you rolling. And it pulls up everything. And then as you start killing deer, harvesting deer and whatever, and checking your tags, it keeps a record on your app, on your phone. This is one method. There's, you can also call in and do a telecheck and just go through a checklist and tell them what you've got and the number of points and what county and all that kind of stuff, which is really, really easy also. But the app is really unique because basically you just click on your app, you punch your tag. It says, do you really want to do this? Because you can't reverse it if you do. And you say yes if you want to. And then you just put in your points, your county, and basically notch your tag. And it's done deal. It's turned into the Missouri Department of Conservation. And within a day or so, it comes up on your phone to where when you look at that app, that tag is notched, and it tells you what tags you have available still.
And you don't physically have to tag the deer, right?
You don't. No, you used to, but now if you just have the tag in your possession, as long as the deer is with you in your possession and you have the tag in your possession, then that's all you need. Now, if you take the tag or take the deer somewhere, you need to give the tag to that person or whatever the locker or whatever you're doing, you got to have the tag with that meat. But yeah, as long as the deer is in your possession, you have the tag on you. It doesn't have to physically be on the deer.
I gotcha. And now I know that you work pretty closely, or the DNR officers, and you know how all that stuff works because your dad's the sheriff of the county.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, by doing that system, do you think your guys' Missouri as a whole, their harvest numbers are very accurate?
Yeah, I feel like they're very accurate. Now, we also have that 4-point restriction rule. Now, sometimes, I feel like, and I'm not picking on anybody or not saying it, I'm just saying sometimes I feel like there's deer that are shot, that don't need to be shot. And when people get to him, I look at him like, he's not legal or whatever. We'll brush him under the trees here and we'll go hunt again or whatever. So I'd say there's probably some deer that aren't tagged every year, unfortunately, but that could happen regardless of the 4-point rule or not. But I think that might be, if it's not legal, then no one wants to pay a fine. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think you probably get that anywhere in any state,
Yeah.
just hunters not being ethical and everything. But I guess, until I get a little more educated, which I feel like I'm pretty educated on Michigan's process, but I just don't think our harvest numbers are very accurate. Like, because we don't have to check any deer. In my whole life, I've never checked one deer.
Really?
Yeah, really. And, I've killed, 3 or 4 bucks or 3 or 4 deer over in Missouri. I've checked every one because I've had to, And I remember back in the day, 2012, the first time I ever went to Missouri and hunted, I was actually filming. But I remember the people I was filming, they killed a doe, and you had like, I think it was you had until 10 or midnight that night to call it in or something like that. And then they spit you back a number that you write on your tag, and then you tag your deer. And that was the first time I ever really got an experience with the telecheck, which I was like, that's awesome, because it automatically is into the system right away. And there's no cheating. There's no, it's right there. And also, I think at that point, I don't know if it was Missouri. I know Illinois at one time when I hunted Illinois, they asked me how many bobcats I saw, how many coyotes I had saw, how many turkeys I had saw up to that point. So that was kind of cool too. And I don't really think they expect you to give like a solid number, but they want a roundabout number for those other animals. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I feel like the numbers are more accurate out there than they are here in Michigan, and I could be totally wrong, but and all my close friends and everybody, I don't know anybody in Michigan that's actually checked a deer, not one.
Yeah, I'd say if you guys aren't checking deer, then I don't know how it would be 100% accurate.
Yeah.
But there's surely a method. They'd have something in place.
Right. And I think I actually have heard some scuttle around that there might be something like that coming to Michigan, like a telecheck or something. I don't know. But the app thing for Missouri, and I know personally the last 2 deer I think I killed in Missouri, I did with the app, and it literally takes 3 minutes, and you're done.
It's simple.
It's so easy. Your tag's punched. It's done. And I just think it's too convenient to not do it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
Yep.
there is check stations around Michigan, but you have to physically take the deer to the check station, which can get difficult for, hunters. Let's say you don't get the deer out of the woods until 10, 11 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? You really don't want to take that deer to the check station. But if you can have an app, or if you can have, a call in, then that's perfect, because you can do it right there, right before you field dress it, or right at the truck or something when you get it loaded up. Call it in real quick, takes 5 minutes, get it done,
Yeah, I 100% see both sides of that, because I remember when I was growing up, we had telecheck stations we had to take our deer to physically, and I personally love that, because I got to see what neighbors and friends and people in the county were killing. It'd be a line of like 15 or 20 or 30 trucks, and you literally park and you get out of your truck and you walk up and down just talking to people and hearing their deer story and what happened and what they killed. And, oh my gosh, this one was fighting and this one was breeding a doe and this one was breeding another buck, or, whatever. I mean, there was all sorts of stories going on, and I personally like that. But then again, I see the flip side, 'cause I also like the convenience of just having it done, over with, and everything's taken care of, and then I can process the deer or take it to the locker or whatever I'm going to do with it, sooner.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and not to bring up memories, did you kill a deer that first trip to Missouri when you were here filming? I was just wasn't sure. I didn't know.
I did. Actually, no, I didn't. Not the very first trip. It was the second trip I actually killed a deer.
The second trip you killed one.
But it was the same year. I actually killed 2 bucks that year, believe it or not, in the same ditch. How far away? I would say a good 400 yards away, and they were 2 great hunts.
I would agree with that. Probably 400 yards apart, yeah.
Yeah. That is, that stand that I killed that first deer out of I still love that stand. Rattled that buck in. First buck I've ever rattled in, and that's a hunt I will never ever forget. I mean, that was a textbook morning hunt, crisp, cold. You could hear a pin drop from a mile away, and as the sun hasn't even cracked, but it's it's daylight enough, and pick up those antlers and crack them together, and that deer ran in. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was
cool. And like, to set this up for the listeners, I mean, this stand you're in is halfway down a steep bank, and this ditch is probably about 80 yards wide or 70 yards wide, going east and west.
That falls between a hayfield and a cut cornfield at the time.
That's right. And this ditch is probably a good half mile to 3/4 mile long, probably connecting, a major creek and a block of timber and another block of timber on the other end. So you get travel up and down it. Well, the stand is halfway down the hill, maybe 3/4. And literally when you're in the stand, you're eye level to the hayfield to the south of you. And this deer just barreled into AB's horns and dropped in. You know how they do. When you hit the horns together and they're close and they react so fast and they're rutted up, he just blew in underneath AB, and it was game over basically from there. But that's how this is. And it's kind of crazy, because Sawyer and I had a hunt out of that stand this year in November. Same thing. He hits the horns and boom. He's still rattling, and I'm trying to get the horns stopped because the deer is blowing in directly underneath of us. And it was a good 3.5-year-old buck with a lot of potential. Mm-hmm. So we passed him up, but that stand is just really good for that scenario right there.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stands, and I mean, for good reason. But it's, that was my first out of state buck, I think, that I shot. And thank God I had it on film.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't much of a deer at all. But just the way it happened, I feel like he was probably a little bit of an older deer. I don't know what you thought. It's probably a good deer to probably get out of the herd.
I thought the deer I was at work that morning. I remember you guys calling me. I thought the deer was 100% a 4-year-old deer. He could have been a giant 3-year-old. Either way, if he was a 6 point and he's a 3-year-old, he needed killed,
And that's the thing. Like it happened so fast. The deer, and all I saw was a frame coming through. And, and it, like I said, it just happened fast. Like I couldn't get the antlers out of my hand quick enough and get the bow in my hand. And just to let everybody know too, disclaimer, the deer was a 6 point. At that time, you could not shoot 6 points in Missouri, which it's my fault. I really didn't know that. And to be honest with you, it happened so fast. I just saw a pretty good frame coming at me and didn't even know it was a 6 point. And, but like what Steven alluded to a little bit ago about deer, hunters putting their deer underneath the, some leaves or something and just going hunting again. I wasn't raised like that. And, I knew I screwed up. So I called the DNR and they came out and checked it out. And I did get fined. But I did want to do the right thing and donated the meat and everything to the homeless and everything and the hunger. You guys have a program there that you did or that you have, and then we donated the meat and everything, and nonetheless it did kind of ruin the experience just a little bit, but still to this day I'll never forget it because it was an unbelievable hunt. But it was just one of those things that everybody makes mistakes. I won't lie, I made a mistake and I made sure I paid for the mistake as well. So
yeah, and that was the cool thing, and that was one of the things I respected the most out of that you guys. I mean, there was no question. It was just going to be done right, and that's I think that was the important message that everyone needs to get out of it. That you have to own up to your mistakes, not only in deer hunting but in life. I mean, you just have to own up to it and be a man and just accept it. Like you said, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and it's basically how we handle them is what defines us from the rest. So that was a good decision, and that's just how it should have been handled. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, and on the plus side, I got to meet the DNR officer, really nice guy.
Yeah, which unfortunately he's actually retiring in July this year, so he's just got a month left and he's gone, and we'll have a new young guy who's going to be absolutely gung-ho. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm 100% all for that.
Yeah.
Not that Jim wasn't. Jim was a very good agent. He's been a very good agent for many, many years, and I've got a lot of respect for him. But with him going out, they always bring in someone else younger, just out of the academy, basically, or someone who's been working somewhere but is still very young. And I think the new one will be a gung-ho, and I think it'll be good for our area and in general, just to try to keep people honest and cut down the poaching and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and there's a reason why Missouri does the adults can't shoot 6 points. I think they can now, right? They changed the rule now. Yeah,
and I see both sides of that too. As a deer manager and as a guy who likes stories and stuff with deer and follows particular deer, there's been a couple occasions where I've had some bully 6 points that were 4 and 5 years old that I just love to kill, and I couldn't. I mean, I personally had an opportunity to shoot one. You can't do it, and you have to. I could have had my daughters. I mean, Cadence could have killed one of them, but I've always just told her she can kill what she wants to. If she wanted to kill it, she could. If she didn't, she didn't. But now, I guess where I'm going with that is now that we've had a couple cases of CWD introduced back into the county as of this year or as of last year's season, and so they're taken away. We can't do corn piles, we can't do mineral sites, and all that stuff anymore. No feeders any longer. So starting as of July this year, they also took away the point restriction for our county in Missouri, which opens up everything. So I see the value in that, and I see the harm in that, coming from, and not trying to, I'm not even going to say it, but I just see I see both sides of that, because as a manager, I like to shoot 6 points if he's mature and is a buck that we need to get out of the, get gone because he's a bully or something like that, and his genetics are completely poor. But yeah, that's in the works for this year. So there's no point restriction. So you can shoot anything you want this year.
Well, perfect. Now I'll have to come and find some bully 6 points.
Absolutely. I'll set you up tight on them.
No, yeah. And the thing is I know I said it before, accidents do happen. And
yeah,
I'm not trying to sugarcoat it at all. I screwed up. And it took away from the experience a little bit, but it was also a good experience to go through because, it just, when I walked up on that deer and saw that deer and I knew it was a 6 point, and that's kind of when it hit me, and then you and I had kind of talked about it, and I'm like, darn it, I don't think this is a legal buck. And that just, I learned something there, always know what you're shooting, or always know what you're,
identify your target.
Yes, and know the rules as well. I think it was something you and I probably had talked about before then in passing, but it never really registered. You always get into the heat of the moment kind of thing. And
sure.
Your first my first, big out of state trip and everything. And it just kind of, I screwed up, and, it wasn't the greatest. I mean, it sucked, but I mean, those are the things, you got to live with them. And, on the plus side, I got a bully 6 point out of there for you. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's not the end of the world either. Like I said, you manned up and you accepted the responsibility. You did what was right. And yeah, it took a little bit away from the experience, but it was also a lesson, a very valuable lesson. And you've never even came close to making something like that since then, and you've killed 3 deer since then, I believe.
Yep.
Up here with me. So it was one of those things. And just so the listeners know, I mean, a couple weeks after he killed that deer, his name did come out in the paper. And my wife, Christy, took a snapshot of it and sent it to him as a, haha, look what's in the paper. And he didn't find it real funny after the 2 weeks of it, but it's funny now.
I made the local Gazette.
Yeah, you darn sure did.
Leave it to Chrissy to send me a picture of that too.
Yeah, come in from Michigan, stir up all kinds of crazy trouble in Missouri, and it was all fun.
Don't like those Eastern boys, I'll tell you. But anyway, so a good transition point. I want to get into a story about a deer that you killed in 2016, I believe it was, if I remember right.
Yeah, Boomerang.
Boomerang, yes. I want to talk about this deer because this deer, you had a lot of history with this deer. You hunted this deer for, if I remember right, 3 years or 4 years.
Yeah, well, hunted him for 2 years, and he was on the radar on the farm for 3 years that we knew of. But yeah, knew of him when he was 3.5, killed him when he was 5.5.
Yeah, so kind of break down for everybody, the property situation, how big your property is, kind of what it consists of. And let's kind of go into that first year when you actually, you encountered him and you knew he was around and how he got his name.
So we have 140 acres of the home farm, and we're surrounded by all managed property. Like the property to the north of us is like, 8 to 1,500 acres, however you want to look at it, consecutive with one owner. And he's a big buck nut, from out of state. And so we have the luxury, our farm, we've put a lot of work into our farm with food plots and CRP and some hinge cuts and anything we can do to make our property better, to hold deer, to bring more deer in, to filter more deer through. We try to do it. And we've had a lot of success over the last several years, killing really good deer, like, 80s, 70s, 60s type deer, pushing 190s deer last year. And so we've had a lot of success building the property up and being able to harvest some of the older, bigger bucks on the property. So The story with that deer was we encountered when he was 3, knew he was going to be something nice, but didn't know exactly what he'd become. He had really good mass as an 8-point, and the following year picked him back up on trail cameras. I was right. He turned into like ball bat mass. I mean, really heavy, real thick, good main beams. Just a really unique deer.
Was he on the farm all year, like from summer throughout the whole year? Did he live on the farm?
No, he lived south of our property. The best I could tell from the trail cameras, but once September came around, he moved to our property and stayed there. With the exception, he would dart off to the south and check some ditches or have a little, run around overnight or something. But he'd always be back on the cameras like daily.
Now, why do you think he was hanging around your farm more come the fall?
I think honestly, it's just because of all the work we put into the property and made it so attractable. I mean, we've got 140 acres and we've literally got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 food plots on it, that are anywhere from a quarter to an acre. So we have a lot of food. Plus we have corn and beans up on top. And we have quite a bit of timber on the property that joins a lot of timber also. So we get a lot of different bucks moving through our property. I think that's really why. I mean, he lived on a different property through the most of the year because he wasn't being bothered. He didn't have to compete for anything. And then once season came around where he started to think about running around, chasing does and whatever else, and all that attractive green food comes in, that he relocates to our property, which he's not really relocating very far because he was just a farm or so to the south. So, he just, but once he moved, and he did it 3 years in a row. So I knew that's what he was doing. And I can say he did that because, I would always pick him up on the south end of my property on the cameras first. If I picked him up first, the first time I pick him up, it'd always be the south, and then he would move throughout the farm and I get him on all the other trail cameras. So back and forth like that. So the second year when he was 4.5 years old, we were hunting a food plot one night. We had a cold front come in late September. I think season had been open for a week or two, and my wife and I went out. She actually had the bow in her hand at this time, and he came out in the food plot, worked his way up to us. He was 4.5, and he was quartering to us, and we could not. She was a full draw, but she could not get the quartering shot or the broadside shot. So we elected to let him walk, and then we never saw him again on trail cameras, but not in person. He was a very very wise deer, very smart deer.
So that would have been 2014. He would have been 4.
That would have been 15. I killed him in 16.
Okay,
yeah.
So 2015, he would have been 4.5, and you saw him once on the hoof that year. Now, explain his rack a little bit. What do you have for headgear?
So real massive beams, and when he came up from his bases, he carried that mass all the way out to his tips. Now he was just an 8-point, okay, which I don't care if they're 8 or if they're 22 points. I mean, if they're 4.5 or they're a buck that I like for a characteristic or whatever, then I'm going to pursue them. But this particular deer, his main beam I think it was his left main beam. It looked just like a boomerang. It came up, swirled around, and came back in kind of, and instantly it was real thick and palmated like a boomerang. They're real thick and kind of they're thin, but they're wide. And I just thought it resembled a boomerang. So that's the handle I gave him, and it stuck.
So then transition from, you're still in 15. You and Christy encountered him on the food plot. So you got him on trail cam the rest of that year, but never saw him on the hoof. So explain the trail cams. Like, was he pretty sporadic, or did you have a pretty good pattern on him? Was he nocturnal? Like, what was that situation?
No, absolutely not. He was nocturnal, but he was a daylight walker also. It turned out for me as I was either working or hunting a different farm, hunting a different deer or something where I was never on him, so the deer was killable. I hadn't put as much time as I could probably to really pin him down. You know what I mean? In 15, which is fine because we never saw him again on hoof that year, just trail cameras. And when I picked him up in 16, the summer of 16, when he first came across my trail camera, I was like, whoa. I mean, because he almost, as crazy as it sounds, he put on a lot of mass. I mean, he had like 8-inch bases.
So what do you think he jumped from score-wise from 15 to 16, from 4.5 to 5.5?
30s to 50.
So he was a 130-inch 8-pointer as a 4.5, and then he went up to in the 150s, low 150s as a 5.5-year-old 8-pointer, which is a big 8-pointer.
Yeah, just real massive. I mean, not even long tines. I mean, he doesn't even have long tines, which is crazy. He's just got really big bases and continues all the way out to the end of his main beams, and all of his points that were short were still just fat and just massive points. So, so we'd seen him all 16 and had him on trail cameras, and I really wanted to get a crack at him that year. And he was living on the neighboring property to the south, which was a lease, and those guys were hunting it. and even even like you and Lee had came up, or was it you?
Lee had come up with Adam.
That's
earlier,
right.
I believe, and then I was coming late season, like January. So like the last week of season. So to let everybody know, the lease that was to the south, Lee and I and Steven, had permission to hunt this lease. It was actually Chris and Casey's lease that they never hunted that year, and they would let us come over there and hunt. And that's kind of, we would take, if we could kill some does, or if we had a nice buck come out, that's, we could hunt that. And that lease was basically consisted of a lot of ag with a couple of ditches that ran through it, which late season, leaving some food, that property is dynamite. But to look at it, it's just like, oh, it's a whole bunch of ag. Well, if you can leave some food on that with those ditches, I mean, late season, those fields light up. And that particular year, it was corn, and we had left some corn. So,
yeah,
just to explain it a little further there. So,
yeah, so the deer Boomerang had been daylighting on the trail cameras on the standing corn, and we moved a Banks blind into the standing corn and didn't even brush it in. We moved it in, knocked down corn in front of it, made some shooting lanes, and just waited for the right time to hunt it. And I knew that Lee, AB, Adam, they were all going to make their appearance. So, I mean, he was right there for them to kill. And before Lee came, I told him, I was like, hey, I know he's coming from the south somewhere, but he's daylighting, he's using this Ventro, and I think, put in some time, and I think you'll be able to kill him. And Lee, he gave it a college effort. Like, he was all over that deer. He never saw the deer in daylight, except for one time he thinks he might have saw him, and I'll tell you that at the end of where I'm going here. But him and Adam hunt that location for like 3 or 4 days straight, and then he has to go to Phoenix to film something for Brotherhood. And they leave, and I told him, I was like, hey, when you guys are done hunting him, I'm gonna hunt over there. I'm gonna try to knock one down over on the corn. And so I picked Lee's brain a little bit. I'm like, did you see him? Do you think you saw him? What do you think? And he's like, well, I think I might have saw him one night coming across the hill, but I don't really know if it was him because it was in the, he was daylighted there, and I could just see a silhouette. And I'm like, okay. So they leave. I'm at work, and I'm thinking about the whole situation. I'm like, where's that deer at? Where's he coming from? What's he doing? And why was he daylight and now he's not? Something's happened that's messed him up. And I called Lee up, and I said, hey, what's up? And he's like, not much, man. I was like, question for you. And he's like, what's that? And I'm like, I'm hunting a rooster lease tonight. He's like, okay. And I said, where were you parking? And he said, well, I was parking at the head of the ditch on the gravel. And I said, okay. I said, by the pond. He said, yeah. I said, okay. I said, all right. I said, well, I'm going to go kill Boomerang tonight. Thanks for the information, and I'll send you pictures. and he just laughs, they're just like, whatever. We hunted that deer 4 or 5 days, never saw him once. So whatever. I'm like, okay. So my mind's working all the time. And it's not just with this deer. It works with every deer that I'm hunting or, wanting to go after. What's he doing? Where's he coming? Why is he using this fentro? Why is he using this ditch? Well, all this stuff goes through my head. So my thinking was the deer was living across the gravel in one singular ditch. And
to the south of the Rucherly. So
yes,
to break the big picture down for everybody. So Stephen's family farm, picture that being to the far north.
Yep.
And then it goes the Rucherlies, and then this deer Boomerang was living to the south of the Rucherly. So he was coming through the Rucherlies to Stephen's farm, but he was hitting the rooster corn before he got to Stephen's farm.
I think he was actually living on the rooster lease, just on the south side of the gravel. See, the rooster lease, 169 acres, split by a gravel road, and it's all open corn and beans, except for just 2 ditches coming through it, 3 ditches maybe. So he was living on the south side of the gravel road on the rooster lease in one ditch. That's about 600 yards long probably, and probably 100 yards wide. But I put that together. I had some trail cameras running. I'd had him over there on that ditch. I'd had him a lot on our farm. He was everywhere just back and forth. And, so going through what the process was in my head, I'm like, why is he not showing up when they're hunting him? He's been there every day in daylight the past week and a half. What's going on? And come to find out, what my intel and my brain, they were parking at the head of the ditch. The deer was coming up the ditch, seeing the car or the truck, and it was turning around and going back. They were cutting him off, literally parking and cutting him off. Mm-hmm. So Lee, the great white hunter, was cutting his own throat and didn't even know it. So, so what I did was I told him, I'll kill him tonight, but I'm going to go kill him. And here we go, and they're like, whatever. I'll send you pictures. Well, I go, and I'd already put it in my head what was going on, and I parked at the far end of the rooster lease, and I made a big walk in, a big swooping walk versus walking just straight over the hill to the blind. And literally, we had some blowing snow that night. I know that took effect in him being up on his feet, but he came from the west, which he came straight out of that ditch, dropped into the other ditch, came out of the west, and right down the tree line. I see him. I'm in the banks blind over standing corn and knocked down corn, and he is on my family farm property line. So I have a 140-acre block of timber to the north, and he is on the very south line of it, which is all open fields where I'm sitting with standing corn. And he's about 200 yards from me on the fentro. And I'm like, wow, there he is, big old tank, muscular 5-year-old body and big buck. I knew instantly when I saw him, who it was. And so the deer comes up and looks at the blind, looks at the corn, and he's not going to commit. He literally turns and walks the other way a little bit, and he's kind of going slow. And I'm like, man, I'll kill him, but I was hoping tonight would be the night. And so I just watch him, and pretty soon, out of nowhere, now this is in December, out of nowhere, like a year and a half or a yearling doe comes blowing out of the timber, and her tail's just twitching, and she's doing a little jig and a dance, feeling her oats, I guess. And she stops at about 70 yards from Boomerang and flips her tail and looks at him, and he turns around and faces her, and then she turns and runs straight to me. I'm like, wow, what in the hell is she doing? I'm like, what is this crazy doe doing, and she's real young, and literally that's all it took. Boomerang turns, jumps the fence, and just marches straight to me on a string. And he was literally in the corn for probably 10 minutes before I even got him killed. He was at 50 yards, he was at 40 yards for a while, he was at 45 yards for a while, and finally got him into like 38 yards and got him broadside when I was able to draw my bow and stick him. But I hit him, and I've never seen this happen, and I can't even explain it. When I shot, he fell straight down, and instantly I grab another arrow, and I'm thinking I've spined him, and looking at him laying there at 40 yards, I mean, I didn't spine him. I double lunged him, and my arrow was sticking out of him on both sides, and he is still just acting like he was spined. So I ended up shooting him again and finishing him off real quick. But I've never ever seen that. I've never double lunged a deer in my life, and they just fell straight down and acted like they got hit with a gun, basically, or shot with a gun. That's what he acted like.
Yeah.
But yeah, sweet story. And I ended up calling Lee, I think Chris and Casey, and I think even UAB, from the field there, and FaceTiming and showing the deer and everyone to everyone. And it was a good story and a really fun hunt. I mean, it's fun to figure those deer out.
It is, and that's a good transition point to another question I have here in a hot second. But what did he ended up scoring? Do you remember?
Yeah, he's like a low 50s. I taped him out like 153, 152.
Okay.
And I'm not going to be hung up on it. I know that's where he's at, somewhere around 150. And it could be 153. It could be 149. He's right there.
I mean, it's a giant deer. I mean, I've got to hold him, and his bases. I mean, when he says they're like Coke cans, they are
Literally.
so like you can't put your whole hand around him. I just couldn't believe the mass on that deer, and I haven't seen mass on a deer like that since Casey and I killed Megatron in Illinois, that 182-inch 8-pointer back in 2014. Yeah, and I mean, he had like, I don't know, he had like 43 or 45 inches of mass. That's just unbelievable. And I bet you Boomerang had at least that, if not close. I mean, it was because his tines, like you said, were pretty short.
They were. Yeah.
But he was all mass. So, no, that's cool. And like I said, a good transition point there. One thing, and this is something I've never really asked Steven, and it's something just from me observing and getting to see him do his thing in the fall the last 4 years, and he has got an unbelievable ability to get on mature deer, and his stand placement is spot on. I mean, there's times where I've went and sat some stands, that you've hung, and you're like, you need to go up there and hunt this stand. It's a good win for it, yada yada. You'll give me the song and dance and everything, and I get up there and I'm like, you've had this. Everybody gets this feeling. It's like, man, I'm not going to see a deer out of this. And all of a sudden, here comes the biggest deer you've ever seen in your life. And I'm like, holy shit. I mean, he was spot on. He told me he was going to come up the head of the ditch. He was going to come over this hog's back, and there he is. And I'm like, your ability to put a stand somewhere and figure these deer out is just unbelievable. I mean, second to none for people that I know, and to get on big deer. So basically what I want to break down is, when you're breaking down a piece of ground, what are you doing to single out these places? Now, I know the farms that you've hunted your whole life. So let's make it a little more challenging. Let's say it's a new piece that you're going into. What are the steps you're taking to find the best area to get the best success killing the biggest deer on the farm?
Well, thank you first and foremost for the compliment. I don't feel like that. I feel like this is me. I enjoy it. I love it. It's a passion. It runs through my blood. I just enjoy stepping on a piece of dirt for the first time, or for the 50th time. And there's still pieces I've hunted all my life that I don't have figured out, and I'm always adjusting. I'm always doing something. I'm always observing. So I appreciate you saying that. But I'm no better at it than you are, honestly, in the grand gist of things. My deal is I'm more conservative off the get-go than I am just blow in and hang. So this particular farm we're talking about is a big chunk of timber, and then it drops off really hard to the south or to the north and goes down to some ag fields. And I remember, watching one of Lee Lakowski's hunts several years ago, and he was talking, I'm not really in this stand, right? I'm in it, but I'm going to have deer downwind of me over here. But here's the thing, I'm sitting on the top of a hill, and it drops straight down. I have a shelf that drops straight down for about 150 yards, and everything that crosses underneath me, all my wind blows over. And if it's in the morning, my thermals are rising and my wind's still blowing over them, so they're not winding me. And I related that to this particular farm because that's how it lays out. And so when I first moved in and did that, I killed a 163 out of one of the stands that I placed. And so after that, I saw what that deer, he was a 4.5, and I saw what he did. And I'm like, okay, well, they're using this main ditch. They're coming up, crossing the hog's back, working down towards the pinch down here. And so I move into a property, and first and foremost, I'm trying to get to the best area, but I'm trying to observe the best area from 100 to 200 yards out, because I would much rather put my eyes on the deer and try to call to the deer. If it does not work, like most of the time it doesn't work, if it did work every time, we'd all have a bunch of deer on our wall, but it doesn't. And that's what I like about it. But I try to get to a spot where I think is one of the right location, and then I hang back a little bit and try to observe and watch the deer movement first, and then make adjustments after a year or so. Or if for some act of God, I get a big 4 or 5 or 6-year-old using that when I'm observing him, then of course I'll drop the set and move it and try to get on him immediately. But for the most part, I move it to where I think it should be, hang back a little bit, and then observe, and then fine tune it. But I've been very fortunate in my life of hunting some very good ground, and some ground that's laid out right, that anyone can do it. It's nothing that, it's just something that I've just taken a big liking to, and I just really, really enjoy stepping on new ground and dialing it in. It's not always perfect the first time, but that's also something I like about it, is that you get it close and then you just kind of fine tune it. So
Yeah, and that's kind of what, and I've been really picking your brain, you and Jake Ellinger, about my 1 acre farm here in Michigan. And I think this year I've got it set up about as the best it can be as far as stand placements, and it's just now getting in it and figuring out and hunting. I mean, obviously it's 1 acre, but when I say it's just 1 acre, there's actually more that goes to it. The neighbors have warm season grasses with a whole bunch of dogwood and autumn olive and everything on the other side. So that really helps out too. Now, if it was just 1 acre in the middle of a section, and that's all it was, I'm not saying it wouldn't be good, but there's some other things that make it pretty good.
Just so the listeners know, AB's not hunting 1 acre in Michigan. It's a bigger farm with a 1 acre or so patch of timber that he's done some hinge cutting and habitat work to enhance it.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, and I don't know if I've given you many updates about that, but since Jake and I went in there and did that, we did that early December. We did all that hinge cutting, and now I thought it was gonna be corn this year because it was beans last year, but my brother-in-law is gonna do beans again this year.
Yeah.
Which is no big deal, but since Jake and I went in there, and the whole plan Jake and I were talking about, and I was talking with you as well, is stay the heck out of there.
Yep.
It's not very big. Don't pressure it. Get in, get out, be done with it. Let it sit the whole summer until you get that first cold front. Go in there and hunt it. And we went in there, opened up the canopy, thickened it up, and I'm telling you what, there is a group of deer that live in there right now. I was back there. It was a rainy day. It was a couple weeks ago I went, and I'm like, it's raining. I know it's, midsummer, but I I just figured it'd still be good if it was raining, get in there, hang my stands, and just get out and be done with it. And went in there and hung all the stands. I've got 3 stands set in the 1 acre of timber on each point, basically. And then on the south end, on that south point, I've got another stand for like a decoy setup. Basically, it's looking over where 3 ag fields meet each other. And through the last 3 years, deer just, for some reason, they flock to that point. I don't know why, but you just see a lot of deer at that point. Whether you're driving by or you're hunting and you just kind of look over, there's always deer at that point. So I'm like, well, it's worth putting a stand there. And if it's like a rut and you get I've had a decoy work very well here in Michigan and killed some pretty good deer over a decoy. So I'm like, oh, that'd be a good opportunity for me to do that. So, but back to the 1 acre, we've made 3 different, sets of beds and went in there and did some detail work and cut a lot of trails through there. And I never would have guessed it, but I see it firsthand now. It works. The deer use those trails, they use those beds, and it's so thick now that they want to be in there. And it's only 1 acre, and they prefer that over the 20-acre piece of timber that's wide open, that's not 100 yards away from it. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, and just think if you go in there, you can't probably, I think, but if you had the ability on that 20-acre timber to go in there and make 2 different separate hinge cuts on each end of it,
yep,
you would literally hold double the amount of deer that property is eligible to hold right now on the carrying capacity, just because they can't see each other.
Yep, exactly. And that's what Jake said. We're walking by that 20-acre piece, and he's like, "Can we hinge cut that?" And I said, "No, I wish we could," because he's like, "That is the woods that I love to hinge cut." I mean, it's a 20-acre piece of timber, and it kind of gets a low in one area, but in the winter you can see right through it. You can see to the other side of it, and it would have been pretty cool if we could have, but we can't.
Yeah,
so.
Jake from State Farm would have made fast work from that with a chainsaw in about 30 minutes. He would have had both bedrooms created and down, and it would have been a done deal.
Yep.
He's a madman when you put a chainsaw in that guy's hand. He is an architect. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he does it very, very well.
Yep, he's going to be coming on here soon whenever him and I can hook up. He's a very busy man.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a hold of him, but he's very
knowledgeable.
I
think he said he was screening your calls, actually.
He probably did say that.
Not really.
Well, he texted you and I the other day about his mount he got back at Brutus, and you never replied to him. I was the only replied to him.
Yeah, don't worry about that. I called him.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But to go back, I got one more question.
What you got?
To talk about about your stand placement and everything. What is your number one feature that you like in a woods? Now, is that an ag field? Are you looking for a really good pinch? What does that pinch look like, if so? I mean, what do you look at the most and it's like, okay, I got to get a stand right in here, even if you didn't know anything about that property?
Yeah. So I'm fortunate enough, in the Midwest, we have a lot of inside corners. We have a lot of slivers of timber connecting blocks of timber. And I love them. I love inside corners off ag fields. I love hunting. I love to figure out where doe bedrooms are and hunt the outskirts of them in the rut. I think it's the downwind side of them, I should say. I think it's absolutely dynamite. I think you catch, certainly probably 60% of your bucks on that property circling those downwind sides. And if you're set up right, I think you can get them between you and the bed and capitalize on that. But what I look for just off the get-go, say I pull up a new farm for somebody, I look at the aerial map, I'm looking at pinch points, I'm looking at funnels, I'm looking at inside corners. And then once I get boots on the ground, then I start looking for designated bedrooms and where I think, doe bedrooms are, and then how I can set up safely off of those to observe and then readjust once I get some time in the seat. But in a nutshell, that's what I'm looking for, is inside corners, funnels, and pinch points.
So explain a pinch point to everybody that might not know what a pinch point is. Like give a couple different scenarios.
So I described like so on a particular farm I have a big block of timber to the south and I have a big block of timber to the east. Okay. And connecting those two is a fence row on both ends coming from the east and the south that connects a little 3-acre patch of timber. Okay. So instantly when I look on the map, I'm like, okay, well, I can hunt that block of timber right there on a south wind, and I'm going to catch either calling or just cruising. I'm going to catch the natural movement of the deer moving from block of timber to block of timber using that little 3-acre patch of timber between them. So I go in there, I do some hinge cutting, I do some blocking, I find out what trails are using the most, and I figure out the tree, and then I do blocking behind the tree for my entrance, and it pinches those deer down. When they come into that block of timber and they hit to that main trail, or I see them and they come my direction towards the stand, my hinge cutting and my blockers that I've cut pinches those deer right to where I need them, is to where I've already figured out that's where they want to go and where they want to come from anyway. So basically all I did was made it easy for me. They want to come out of there, they want to go to there, so I just make them go a certain direction that gives me a broadside shot to get an arrow on one of them. But that's what I'm looking for, is just a thin piece of timber or a small patch of timber that connect two larger blocks of timber, or even just, you have a block of timber with a brushy fence row between it, connecting the two pieces, then you hunt that fence row somehow for the right direction to get in and out of it. And man, during the last week of October, the first week of November, you can really capitalize on some cruising bucks in those parts.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen you do it firsthand. You're really good at that. Like I said, your stand placement to me is just, you put stands in places that it's just dynamite. And honestly, so that year 2015, when I went down there late season and Lee and I were hunting
Trash Man,
we were hunting Trash Man, and that deer, I mean you could have hunted him, you could have sat all day to try to kill him
in January.
In January he was so like crazy on the cameras. I mean, 1 o'clock, 10 a.m., 9 a.m., 9 p.m. Like, it was just like you had no idea when he was going to be there. But anyway, we knew we needed to be down in that pinch on the inside corner of that winter wheat field.
Yeah.
Because that's just, and we had to wait. I think it was like 4 or 5 days we had to wait because we didn't have a good enough wind to get down there. So we hunted an observation stand that we could have killed him from, hanging
it.
Yeah, well, it didn't help that when we went in to hang the stand in the tree I wanted to get in, and he's sitting under the tree at noon.
Yeah. And that's what you meant by it. That deer was all over the cameras at all different times of the hour or the day. So we didn't know where we were going to see him or where we're going to kill him, but we knew we were going to see him if we could get there.
Right, and you and I had talked about sitting in this particular spot because you could see a majority of the farm and see all these ditches. So if we were going to lay an eyeball on him, basically we were going to just try to find him, figure out where he was moving, and then move in. Because I had 7 to 8 days to hunt.
Yeah.
Well, going in there first day, I said, I wanted to get in this tree. Walked in there at noon, and he's under the tree that we're trying to hang in. He spooked, obviously, and
didn't help. It's an 8.5. He was an 8.5-year-old deer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a near impossible deer to kill, and so I hung the stand anyway, thinking, well, maybe we didn't bugger him too bad, and it was bitter cold. We hunted morning and night for that deer, and saw a lot of deer, saw a lot of bucks. Never saw him again. Well, we knew we had to get into that inside corner. and finally got the right wind after 4 days. We took that stand down, went and hung it, went to the truck, went back to Casey's General Store and got some chicken bites for lunch, went back to the stand and sat it, and he didn't end up coming by, but another good 8-pointer, a 4-year-old came by that night, and it was the second to last day of season, and he was a good deer, good mature deer, and I stuck him, and that was they just wanted to be in that winter wheat field, and it was a perfect pinch right there out of that ditch.
Yeah, it worked slick. You capitalized on that, and like I said, you put in a few days and did your homework. I mean, it just wasn't like an obvious, like, oh, these deer are coming across an open CRP field, and we had cameras running, and you were checking cameras, and you were putting in doing your time and putting in your homework on it. So it all come together for you, and like I said, you give me all this credit or whatever, but you do it every year too, and the only difference between you and I is I'm in Missouri and you're in Michigan.
Yeah. There's a little bit of a difference there.
Well, you're right. I'm 280 pounds and you're 160.
Thanks. That's generous. 160. I'm actually like 180 right now.
180.
Well, I'm gonna let you get off here just because we've been talking at it for a little while here, but I appreciate you coming on, man, and I just love talking deer hunting with you, and you've been a wealth of knowledge to me over the last 4 years, teaching me some new things, and I've taken a lot of what you've said, and it's worked here in Michigan too, and the biggest thing that I like that you do, like you said, you're patient. You're patient because you can be patient. Now a lot of guys can't be patient,
yeah,
just because they might be going on a out of state hunt for 3 or 4 days or 5 days, and then you kind of got to move in a little bit, but you're patient, and that's what I'm really trying to start to do this year, and you've really talked me through that, being more of a disciplined hunter, and that's what I'm really trying to do, and so far this summer it's been paying off. Like I said, with the 1 acre, the deer are in there, they're not spooked right now. I just need to stay out of there, and hopefully get me or the wife will get an arrow in one of them this year within that timber. So
I'm sure you guys will. and along the way, I've had a lot of help along the way with some pretty cool people and some really good influences. And I've told this to people before, but I grew up. And I told Mark Jury to his face one day in Iowa that I grew up literally. If you walk into my house right now, and you know this, but if you open up my entertainment center under the TV in the living room, there's almost like every single Jury video that's ever, like DVD that's ever been made.
Yep.
And I used to annoy the hell out of my wife, or she was my girlfriend at the time. I would literally watch those movies over and over because they were doing stuff. Mark and Terry in particular were doing stuff that people weren't. I mean, they were telling the whole story from start to finish on a particular deer, of the season, of their farms, of how they set up. They got into detail, and it was like I was just infatuated with it. Like I couldn't get enough of it. So to the point where I watched the same DVD like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row because I just wanted to sink in, And so along with that, I've learned a lot of my stuff from watching Mark and Terry Jury set farms up and kill big deer, and I just let that stuff sink in, and that's graduated and got to the point to where now I'm working with QDMA, and I've got some awesome people that I can call friends now, and actually if I have a question I can call and ask them, and just like Jake Elinger, Jake's a great guy, and he, does habitat stuff in Michigan, all over the United States for clients, and he does stuff that a lot of people aren't doing, and it's working. It's worked on his farm. Like his farm in Michigan is a legacy farm for QDMA, and I mean that's like crazy. I mean, that's like the top status you can get, like in a farm habitat status for the QDMA department. That it's nuts. And he's just an animal, and he's helping other people do this. And then, there's people like Dr. Craig Harper from Tennessee, and he knows all the information. Like if I have any kind of a question on calibrating sprayers or fertilizer or anything, I mean, I just call him up and say, hey, I got this. And he's like, okay, you need to do this and you should do this. I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge. And then just like with Matt Ross and Kip Adams of the QDMA, I'm actually in, like you mentioned earlier, I'm in New York right now, sitting in a hotel, but all the last 3 days I've been on Kip Adams' personal farm in northern Pennsylvania. And they had a QDMA deer modular for habitat enhancement. And we were fortunate enough to walk all over Kip Adams' farm and see how they've done timber stand improvement and how they've done timber harvesting and how they've, early successional and food plots and just everything they've done on their 700 acres they do for the quality of deer and deer hunting for the family and the kids. And the property shows. I mean, it's a deer hunting camp, and it's a mecca, and they're doing things right. I mean, he's killing five-year-old deer consistently off that farm, and has been for a few years. I'm pretty sure. So, yeah. So, like I said, I've just got a wealth of knowledge at my fingertips, and I'm a very, very fortunate, lucky, blessed man to have that. And it's not a secret. So if you ask me, I'll tell you. If anyone asks me, I'll tell you what I know, because I've had to ask questions to get, anything that I know. And, like I said, I'm nothing special. I'm just a country boy from northern Missouri who loves to deer hunt and is very passionate about it. So I'm happy to do whatever I got to do to help anyone else out.
Yeah, and I'm excited that I can call you one of my best friends, because all that knowledge, then I could just call you every day. I talk to you every day on the phone.
Yeah, and even if
I got a question, and I just call you, and I know Steven knows.
Even if I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I do, and then I'm going to tell you I have to go use the restroom and then call somebody and get the answer and call you back. So
yeah, so you're a good liar and good bullshitter too.
Yeah, definitely a good bullshitter.
Well, I'm gonna let you enjoy your hotel for one more night and get on the plane tomorrow morning and go back and see your girls. And I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, no problem, buddy. Thanks for having me. Like I said, I never expected it, but I greatly appreciate it. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a new thing that is very catchy for everybody who wants to just talk deer hunting and listen to deer hunting instead of listening to maybe a baseball game or a football game or golf or whatever at work or something like that. They can just listen to a podcast, and I think it's awesome. It's a lot of good information.
Yeah, for sure. And that I'm gonna, we didn't even scratch the surface on everything that you're doing and with the management side of things. So I know you're just buying a new farm right now, and I'd like to get you back on and break down that farm and really, hone in on everything that you're going to be doing on it to improve it within the next couple years. And
oh man,
I think that'll be a cool podcast as well. But again, man, I'm going to let you get to sleep. It's 10 after 11 on Sunday night, and it's kind of a last-minute deal, and like I said, I'm grateful you were able to come on here and talk about this, and we'll do this again for sure, man. It's, just another BS session that you and I have on our phone, but just this time we're recording it, so.
Yeah, well, we always have a lot of interesting topics to talk about, and I don't think everyone will want to hear all those topics.
No, no. We'll just stick to the deer hunting ones.
Let's do that.
All right, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you.
All right, bro. Have a good night.
And there you have it. I hope everybody enjoyed that podcast. Steven Stockman is honestly the best guy I've probably ever met. I mean, he would give the shirt off his back to anybody in need before helping himself out. He's an awesome guy. He's a really good deer hunter, and he's a great family man. And I'm really glad that I've got to know him over the last 4 years, and really appreciative of him and his family. Christy, his wife, and his daughters, Cadence and Presley in Oakland, for opening up their doors and letting me come and hunt with them on their farms and staying with them at their house. And, I just can't thank them enough. And I'm just really glad that they're a part of my life. They're really great people to be around. So thanks again to Steven, and also everybody, if you could go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and leave some feedback, it would be much appreciated. And don't forget, next Wednesday, an all-new episode of the Fall Podcast. See you guys.